Hi everyone, this is Kirsten Verklas from NASEO. Thank you for joining the State and Local Planning for Energy Slope Platform webinar. We will get started in just a few minutes at 4 p.m. Hi, this is Kirsten Verklas from NASEO. You've joined the State and Local Planning for Energy Platform webinar, and we're getting started in just a minute. Thank you. Hi everyone, this is Kirsten Verklas from NASEO. You've joined the State and Local Planning for Energy Platform webinar. We're just giving it one more minute until we get started. Thank you. Hi everyone, this is Kirsten Verklas. I'm with the National Association of State Energy Officials, NASEO, and you've joined the webinar on State and Local Planning for Energy Slope platform. Thank you very much for joining. We're very excited to have speakers from the Department of Energy, Joe Egan, and NREL, Megan Day, today with us to walk us through the Slope platform and give us a demonstration on how this platform works and how it is useful to state energy offices. Before we get started, I just wanted to highlight a few housekeeping items. You all have entered this webinar on mute, and we will take questions at the end of the webinar. If you have a question, I would encourage you to type it into the questions box or chat box through the webinar, and I will then relay the questions to John and Megan at the end of the webinar. You can also raise your hand, and I will unmute you at the end during the Q&A portion if you'd rather ask your question through the phone. There are two handouts as part of the webinar in your chat, on your handout panel, so to speak, on the right-hand side. The slides are there, as well as a fact sheet on SLOPE. So feel free to download those handouts as well. So with that, I would like to hand over the speaking role to Chris Yanker, who is from the state of Hawaii, and who is the co-chair of the Electricity Committee. He will introduce our two speakers, and we will then take it from there.
Hello, this is Chris Yanker from the Hawaii State Energy Office. Glad you all could join us today, and I'm happy to introduce our two excellent speakers. We have John Egan is a Senior Energy Advisor in the Weatherization and Intergovernmental Programs Office at the U.S. DOE. He focuses on the role of energy efficiency and other distributed energy resources in supporting affordability, resilience, and sustainability of energy in the United States. And prior to working at the DOE, John served as a legislative staff for two members of the U.S. House of Representatives. He holds a master's degree in public policy from the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University and a BA in government from Dartmouth College. Megan Day is a senior energy planner with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Megan is a senior urban and regional planner where she serves as a lab subject matter expert on state and local energy planning. She leads research, analysis, and technical assistance on subnational clean energy planning, policy, and large-scale solar development. She led the development of city energy profiles for more than 23,000 U.S. cities through the Cities Leading Through Energy Analysis and Planning. That's the Cities LEAP project, with data available on the state and local energy data site, and is currently leading NREL's development of the state and local planning for energy, the SLOPE platform. And with that, I will turn it over to John.
Thanks very much, Chris, for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, this is John Egan from the U.S. Department of Energy. And on behalf of the 8 DOE technology offices that have contributed to this project, as well as NREL, I want to thank you all for your interest in what we're calling the State and Local Planning for Energy Platform, or SLOPE for short. Megan, do you want to move to the next slide? Thanks. So a little bit about the motivation for SLOPE. When it comes to understanding energy efficiency and renewable energy opportunities, we see that there are a lot of publicly available data sources and tools in the marketplace. The 8 DOE offices I mentioned that we're working with have done extensive analysis on the potential for both specific energy technologies and strategies. And here we're talking specifically about some offices that you may have worked with: Weatherization, Strategic Programs, DOE Solar Technologies Office, Wind, Geothermal, Water Power, the Vehicle Technologies Office, and the Building Technologies Office. So all silos of excellence here within DOE. The gap that we're looking to address with SLOPE is to present all of this information in a way that's both integrated across technology types to allow a user to see multiple renewable energy options alongside energy efficiency strategies, and also have information that's tailored to show information at both the state and the local level. So being able to choose a specific jurisdiction and see how these different technologies present opportunities for your community. So while so many states and cities are setting goals for both increasing energy efficiency and increasing renewable energy deployment, and sometimes both in a combined way, we've heard from many of you in state offices, as well as different local government offices, that there's limited time or staff capacity to analyze all of the different opportunities to find the best way to achieve different goals. So with SLOPE, we're aiming to provide an easy-to-access online platform to more effectively support state and local energy planning and decision-making. What you will all see today is a beta version of SLOPE, which integrates and visualizes dozens of distinct sources of renewable energy and hopefully coming in 2020, sustainable transportation data in one central location. Megan, you want to move to the next slide? Thanks. So before I turn it over, just thank you again from all the DOE offices. We've collaborated with a number of colleagues here at the Department of Energy with a lot of different backgrounds and analysis expertise. We're very excited to be able to share this with you today and get some feedback. I also want to thank Megan and her team at NREL for building this platform with DOE funding on the NREL site. Again, feedback from you all today and any thoughts you have in the coming weeks and months will be vital to our success as we look to build this out and ensure the very best user experience possible. As you can see on your screen here, we're happy to take additional comments and questions via email, via slope@nrel.gov. And if you'd like to follow along with the demonstration that Megan will provide, you can access SLOPE beta right now, which we're very excited about, at gds.nrel.gov/slope. And for that, we recommend using Chrome if you have that available. Megan, with that, I'll pass it over to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John, and thanks, folks, for joining us today. We're really looking forward to hearing your input and feedback as to how this platform might serve your energy planning needs and where there might be gaps that we could try to fill moving forward. So I'm going to keep this up for a few seconds longer because I do encourage you to follow along with your own access to the platform and explore maybe different jurisdictions. I'll be walking through it, but please do try to access gds.nrel.gov/slope if you have the opportunity. It looks much better on a monitor than a laptop, and certainly better on a laptop than a phone, but we're working on all of those platforms to make it more accessible. There's a lot of data available. All right, so we will move on to the actual site here, and here we are on the State and Local Planning for Energy, or SLOPE beta site. So if you've accessed that website, this is what you will see. This is the very entry page. And so what we have here is a combination of a mapping of data, a charting of data, and a list of the layered databases here that you can choose from. If you scroll down, you'll see the map legend, the chart legends, units, and a description of the various data sets that we're seeing here, as well as links to the underlying data sources and methodologies. So in order to go through this site today, I'm going to take a specific example, right? So basically a use case. So because I live in Colorado, and maybe will not be too upset if I take Colorado as an example, this is a hypothetical example. I'm not following any kind of state plan, program, or initiative. This is completely hypothetical. But let's walk through this with Colorado as an example, right? So you can either click on Colorado in the map, or you can enter a state or county here, and you can switch between states and counties below here. So what we're seeing here at first is a modeled electricity and natural gas consumption for the entire state. So I've selected Colorado, so it's showing us that for each different sector. And it's stacked on top of one each other in MMBTUs, right? So we have electricity and natural gas consumption modeled for a 2017 baseline and projected out through 2050. So here we're trying to give folks a very entry point modeled data to see what their energy looks like comparatively between sectors and fuel. right? Electricity and natural gas as a starter. Moving forward, we're hoping to layer on here gasoline and diesel consumption, on-road vehicle diesel and gasoline consumption, so you can see how that compares to energy consumption from these other sectors and electricity and natural gas. So we have residential, commercial in red, purple is industrial. So this is just a baseline business as usual projection. The baseline was developed through the city's LEAP project analysis approach. It does use Energy Information Administration data at the state level as kind of a top metric with which we modeled down to the census block, census tract level, oftentimes, depending on the sector. So it should approximate that EIA total data, but it does not match perfectly because it is modeled with a lot of other inputs. So the goal here is, say I'm interested in energy planning in Colorado, right? Maybe I have a goal of higher renewable penetration and higher percentage of our consumption covered by renewable electricity by 2035. We'll take that as our hypothetical. So here I have an understanding of what our energy might look like as far as consumption in the year 2035. So I'm assuming you can all see my cursor here. If you scroll over the chart, you can see the individual data sets and what their values are for 2035. Now, there are decimal points here that is conveying a level of specificity that we aren't able to model, so please disregard that. These are rough approximations. Obviously, any projection is going to, by definition, be wrong, but this is our projection of a modeled energy consumption over time. So take it all with a grain of salt, but it will be helpful, at least I think, in comparative between sectors and fuels and technologies. All right, so we're looking at 2035 for consumption. So my goal is electricity specific. So I'm going to go down here to the chart legends. I'm going to click off natural gas because we're focused on electricity. So now I'm just seeing electricity consumption by sector for residential, commercial, and industrial sectors in MMBTU. That's the unit here. On the map, I'm seeing total MMBTU consumption in a Coroplast map across the US. Now, that's for 2017. What might that look like in 2050? Colorado is kind of in the middle as far as total electricity and natural gas consumption, both in 2017 and looking forward to the future in 2050. But we're looking at 2035 as a goal, right? So you can see the map and the chart comport here. So, okay, that gives me a start of what my energy consumption might be, and I've pulled out the numbers here, and total electricity consumption is modeled to be in Colorado in 2035 about 193 million MMBTU for all sectors. And then you can pull out the individual sectors as well. Oh, but maybe I want to get a little detailed, and I'd like to download the data. So you can click over here on the data set, it will download that data, and you can take a closer look. So I've actually run through this data set really quickly beforehand and pulled out some specific data. We'll take a look at that in a second. Okay, that's our consumption. What about our efficiency potential? We've got two data sets here that we've pulled at the state level. Energy efficiency potential, economic potential, as well as single-family home electricity savings potential and fuel savings potential. So I should probably actually tell you that we also have estimated dollars spent aligned with the electricity and natural gas consumption. We have dollars spent. So we can see again, Colorado is kind of in the middle of the range there for total dollars spent. and certainly remains in that range moving forward, that middling range. Okay, so we're interested in, okay, that's our consumption. How much might we be able to reduce that consumption? Because this is, again, a business as usual case. The projection methodology is based largely on the Annual Energy Outlook 2019 projection data, coupled with state and county-specific data on the number of households and establishments and the energy intensity of consumption in those households and establishments. All right, but I'm really interested in a little bit of sub-state data right here as far as consumption. So here we can click on county. So then you see this data modeled at the county level. We have to select a specific county to look at what that looks like. So here we are in Los Alamos County, Colorado, right? And we're seeing, again, the electricity consumption modeled for that county. But let's zoom out and see what kinds of energy intensity we have here by county in Colorado. Obviously Front Range, higher energy consumption because higher population, and looks like Grand Junction out here. How might that change over time? Again, it's a choropleth map, so not a big change as far as comparative consumption. Obviously increased consumption slightly by 2035. Sometimes these go down a bit because of population decrease or whatnot, or efficiency. So, okay, you can see now that some of the data sets are grayed out. That is because, and contrary to what it might look like, some folks said, well, those aren't relevant anymore. No, it's just actually because we don't have the data at a county level. So the energy efficiency data is at a state level. So we'll click back on here on state. Got to click Colorado again, and we're going to go to the energy efficiency data set. So we have two data sets within this energy efficiency potential by sector. Economic potential, and this is research done by the Electric Power Research Institute. Economic potential assumes that every household and every establishment adopts those cost-efficient measures, cost-effective measures over time. So it's not really a realistic model of what you might actually achieve. So, but it's the very, very top end of potential. So much more realistic is the high achievable potential. This takes into consideration what kinds of levels of energy achievement have jurisdictions achieved historically, and what might they be able to achieve based on that moving forward, as far as adoption rates and conversion of the building stock, etc. So here we have energy efficiency potential. Again, we've got a choropleth map to see how that might look comparatively in Colorado versus other states over time. So here it's much more interesting to look at future potential. This data set only goes out to 2035, so conveniently my goal is 2035. But you can see that obviously there's more potential for energy efficiency savings as you progress over time. And Colorado is, again, kind of in the middle of that progression, getting a little higher perhaps over time, right? We're pretty low potential in 2017, higher potential by 2035 as that increases. Down here on the chart legend, we have mapped this research, the findings by sector. So again, we have the industrial, commercial, and residential sectors mapped out. And what in gigawatt hours, because this is electricity savings, what might we be able to save per industry, per sector? So here we can see over time a range, right? Commercial is red, residential yellow, and industrial here at the bottom is in purple. The range here is representing the level of incentive that's provided for the electricity savings, right? So what we can see is that commercial, while it has a narrow range, meaning it's less susceptible to incentives, has a much higher total dollar savings total gigawatt hour savings potential than the other two sectors, whereas residential in Colorado, although this is generally true for most states, there is a broader range here, and that's because generally there's more households than establishments for commercial and industrial, and they're more influenced by incentives. So here we're mapping a zero incentive to a $20 per megawatt hour incentive, and these are all described briefly in the description with links to the original published research and other data sets that might be relevant. Okay, so I now know that commercial energy efficiency potential is fairly high, not very influenced by incentives, and I'm going to assume that in my hypothetical situation, I probably won't have available funds to support incentives, so I'm going to assume the low end of this range, which is $0 incentives, but maybe education, outreach, that kind of program. And so I can see that in 2035, my commercial high achievable electricity savings potential for efficiency is about 4,800 gigawatt hours. Okay, that's great. Good to know. Now I'm going to drop down here to residential single-family home energy efficiency potential. This one is not projected over time. However, it's looking at the potential kind of in a snapshot based on adoption rate, not specific years. So this is based on the ResStock research out of NREL, and we did supercomputing analysis of all single-family homes with 350,000 different prototypes, and based on level of insulation, 2-story, 1-story, what kind of siding, all those kinds of different configurations for single-family homes. So here we're seeing that in the U.S. as a whole, Colorado, again, is kind of in the middle for single-family home electricity savings potential, and this is cost-effective measures. Down here, we have in the chart, we have the top 10 of over 20 different energy conservation measures for single-family homes. And so here in Colorado, for electricity savings potential, switching to LED lighting is the highest potential, followed by ductless heat pumps. This is displacing electric baseboard heat pumps today, not waiting for a replacement, you know, when the thing breaks. But right now, it is cost-effective to replace electric baseboard heating with ductless heat pumps. So it's replacing electricity with electricity, but the efficiency of a heat pump is so much greater that that is the second highest measure for electricity savings in single-family homes in Colorado, at least according to our modeling. So then you can see the other kinds of measures here for Colorado. And if you want to get a little bit better view of those smaller areas, lots of insulation and sealing and sheathing, as well as smart thermostats here for electricity savings potential. We can also look at fuel savings potential, and here drill and fill is the highest fuel savings potential for Colorado in single-family homes. But you know, I'm really interested in that commercial building and the savings in that sector in my hypothetical here. So let's go down to commercial buildings. Basically, we have modeled data on commercial building count and how that might change over time, again, using some annual energy outlook data, as well as buildings data from each state and county. So here we can help develop like a metric, right? If I have a goal to save electricity and shift more of my electricity to renewables, I want to see how much I can reduce my consumption from efficiency first, and then we'll move on to renewable generation to offset fossil generation perhaps. So building counts will give me a rough approximation of a metric. How many buildings might I need to have adopt certain measures to achieve my economic or high achievable potentials that we've seen? So here we've got a smart axis, so things aren't shooting off into the stratosphere. But in 2035, I'm looking at a building count across the state of approximately 127 million commercial buildings. What's that look like as a county? Obviously, it changes by population and existing building stocks, but here we are, looks like in Pueblo County for Colorado. How does that look compared to the state? Some high growth, again, along the Front Range. And let's look at that over time. Doesn't change a whole lot because those populations comparatively are still going to be growing potentially over time. Pueblo doesn't look like it's projected to grow a whole lot. Maybe Denver County is. Oh, that's Jefferson. Ooh, also flat. These are going to be oftentimes Castle Rock and Douglas County. Looks like it's growing a lot. So 2035, we're looking at 9,500 commercial buildings in Castle Rock. So let's go back to the state. Zoom out here, select Colorado again. Sorry, you have to select it a lot. And 2035, that's my building count. So therein I can say, okay, that means I might need approximately 5% of the commercial buildings to adopt some type of measure. Or maybe I want to look at that metric by square feet instead. And I can say that in 2035, we're looking at square feet of 3.8 million, looks like. And what percentage of those square feet might we need to tackle to achieve our goal in the commercial sector? Okay, so that's an approximation of how a state might use this so far, and as far as energy efficiency and building. Let's now look at the generation side to see where we can shift from fossil to renewable fuels. I'm clicking on utility scale PV here as the first technology among many that we can explore. The Coral Plus map is showing total technical generation potential in the state compared to other states by technology. So we've selected utility scale PV. This is assuming a 100 megawatt system, pretty large. And here, there's a lot of assumptions listed, right? For 3 of these technologies, we're using the Renewable Energy Potential Model, the REV model, and we can go down as close as the county level. So yeah, that's great, county or statewide, but obviously we're not going to build a project that covers the entire state. Where in my state might I want to build? And for Colorado, there's obviously differentiation in terms of the resource and the generation potential, which is oftentimes largely based on the size of the county and the available land, right? We have excluded urbanized areas from utility scale PV development consideration. But this also includes, this analysis includes things like, what is the slope? You can't build on a wildland preserve. You cannot build on a river or the top of a mountain necessarily. So we've got land use analysis here layered onto resource potential and modeled as total technical generation potential in megawatt hours, which is the unit here on the chart and map legend. So again, this is potential, and this is really the very upper end of your possibility for generating electricity from this technology in each county or state, right? You're not going to build everywhere that you can, so you're going to have to look at some lower level than that. So this is by county, and so obviously a lot of opportunity out in the eastern slope here, and a little bit in the corners. Mountainous areas are a little tougher because they're mountainous in Colorado. And here in the chart, we're seeing concentrated solar power as the highest potential. This is one of the 3 technologies for which we have county level data. Utility scale PV, concentrating solar power, and land-based wind. So there's a really high potential for concentrating solar power as far as generation. But it's not being deployed as much these days. So utility scale PV might provide a better opportunity in Colorado, as well as land-based wind. So we have a lot of resource and land availability to develop land-based wind in Colorado on the eastern side of the state here. But total generation potential is lower than utility scale PV and concentrated solar power. Let's go back to the state view to look at some of these other potential data sets, right? So at the state level, we've got rooftop PV from a separate analysis that we've run at the state level. So rooftop PV, Colorado has, again, kind of a middling, it's basically based on the buildings and the population in our state, a middling range of rooftop PV generation potential. Down here, it's obviously pretty small because it's among these little lower ones compared to the 3 big ones. So let's click those off, concentrating, utility PV, and land-based wind. Get a little more detail on these lower potential. It looks like the 4th highest potential in Colorado is hydropower. So that's interesting. Let's go to hydropower and look at those assumptions. Again, I'm going to click off these other 3 technologies so we can get a closer look. This is the number of megawatt hours that could be generated by hydropower. The assumptions are briefly described here in the description, but again, you can go to the model source and look up further detail on those assumptions. But here we're looking at the hydropower generation potential from new stream reach and non-powered dam development, as well as upgrades to existing hydropower facilities. Okay, so it looks like we have a decent amount of potential for hydropower in Colorado. We've got a lot of mountains, a lot of head pressure coming off of those mountains to generate electricity. So that's interesting to know. What I might also want to know is what might those electricity technology generation types cost? So now I'm going to move down to levelized cost of energy. Now this is a very rough approximation. It's a pretty problematic metric, but at least it is helpful in a comparative sense. So we've pulled the levelized cost of electricity or energy over time for these technologies. They're not exact same technologies as you see up here for technical generation potential because it's a different data set. So we don't have all of the same technologies. But what we've added here is fossil technologies, at least for a comparative view. This chart is dominated by geothermal, which has a very wide range, right, of costs that you could see for geothermal generation. I'm going to click that off so I can see more detail in the other technologies. So here we're seeing dollars per megawatt hour projected over time through 2050. And sorry, the years aren't showing on the axis, but I'm interested in 2035. This isn't quite shown here, but we'll take a rough approximation of maybe 2040, right? And here you can see that in Colorado, it looks like the lowest cost technology is hydropower, right? At $18 per megawatt hour on the low end. What we've done here is take the mid-case scenario from the Regional Energy Deployment System, or RED model. This is not going to be what you would find from a power purchase agreement proposal if you issued an RFP. And I can tell you as a former utility scale solar developer that these PV numbers are really high compared. You will see in a PPA below $20 a megawatt hour now. in Colorado for large-scale PV. But it's looking at these approximations over time and how they might compare. So we can see in Colorado, this is coal. So other than geothermal, it's pretty high, except for concentrating solar power, which has the steepest decline over time. Light blue is natural gas. We have natural gas combined cycle, natural gas combustion turbine, and natural gas combustion turbine carbon sequestration and storage. 3 kinds of gas. There is no commercially operating natural gas facility with carbon sequestration and storage, but it's in our model, so we included it here. But you can see that hydro, again, because it includes upgrades to existing hydroelectric generation facilities, is potentially the lowest cost technology. The range you see here is within that mid case. It's basically the range in operating and maintenance costs, right? As well as some resource availability for the renewable technologies. Land-based wind is declining over time. If we click that off, we can see a little bit more of that, where that utility scale PV is. Crossing gas becoming lower cost than gas, at least in terms of this model, over time. Certainly by 2040, when we're looking at this, at the low end. Okay, so that gives me a sense of maybe what I want to plan for and focus on as my suite of renewable energy generation technologies based on potential and cost. I might need to balance a lot of that out with battery storage. Here, based on a lithium-ion, 15-year life, 4-hour storage, you can see that obviously these costs are declining over time. Smart access, so this is not zero. They won't be free, but they will be lower cost in our model over time to help balance out some of that intermittent generation from renewables, if that is indeed the goal. So here in Colorado, let's look. The Coral Plus map is showing the lowest cost modeled technology for the state. Now, it's much more, I think, instructive to see that at a county level. We model this based on balancing area and resource region, which is not an exact match to balancing authority, but it is a close approximation, at least in the balancing area. So there's some subtlety within states. Here, hydro is dominating. That is the blue that you see in 2020. Over time, that changes such that wind is dominating and solar is coming up there. It's just loading still. So land-based wind starts to win as far as the modeled lowest cost of levelized energy generation in the Midwest here throughout the midsection of the state. So you can see that at a state level, but then again, costs are not uniform across states because resource changes depending on where you are within the state. So here by 2050, the model is showing land-based wind in the darker blue is modeled to be lower cost generation, utility scale PV here in the Southwest, and hydro everywhere else. So we still have nuclear, coal, and those 3 kinds of natural gas generation, and none of them come up as the modeled lowest cost technology by 2050, except for some very small areas of the county or the country at the county level or balancing area. You can see the light blue is natural gas when it gets around to loading. Sorry, a little grumpy with me right now. I think there's some in there, or at least there are in 2020, certainly. There we go. We've got some natural gas in 2020. So it looked like they changed in large part to wind in many of those areas by 2050. Okay, so that's an example of how you might use this beta version. Again, it's just a beta where we're exploring different opportunities for energy generation and efficiency, and potential for achieving energy efficiency and generation. So again, we're going to collect that state. So I'll move on to questions in just a minute, but I think the one thing I didn't show you here is we also have offshore wind generation potential modeled. So obviously Colorado, out of luck there, but interesting to see that you have Midwestern states with some opportunity there. We also have mapped floating solar PV, floating solar potential, and that's on man-made water bodies. And it tends to be down here in the small amounts, but certainly potential. Colorado has decent amount of potential. Okay, I think that's plenty of time for me to talk. I'm really looking forward to some questions so that we can explore this site more and hear how it might be making sense and applicable for you, and where might we improve. So I think I'd like to turn it over to some questions moderated by Kirsten.
Thank you very much, Megan. This was really insightful and interesting. Thank you for the presentation. I don't have any questions yet, so just a reminder to the audience, if you have a question, please feel free to type it in the chat box, in the question box, or raise your hand and I can unmute you as well. While we wait for some questions, Megan, you mentioned this is the beta version, so I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about the timeline going forward, maybe other data sets you guys are looking into incorporating, and what sort of the plan for this platform going forward is.
Sure, thank you. So we are excited to build in this coming year two main things. Transportation, in much of our scoping and discussing with stakeholders what they need, was a huge need among state and local energy stakeholders. And so we are working to develop baseline data plus projections and integrate that here for 3 data sets. And I mentioned the diesel and gasoline consumption by jurisdiction. We have that modeled for every state, county, and city. And we'd like to take a look at how that might be projected over time, at least as a start, with a business as usual case. So again, we'll use some annual energy outlook data for that. So that's one data set. The second is vehicle miles traveled, which is closely tied with consumption, fuel consumption. So we have baseline data also for that by city, county, and state. And then the third is looking at vehicle registration by fuel type. And so we have a good amount of data on current vehicle registration. So we're looking at applying a methodology to project that over time to see how might fuel types change over a time, what might your EV adoption look like, hybrids, etc. And so under a business as usual, and then how might that be changed and impact electricity consumption, at least as far as the EV sector of transportation. So definitely integrating transportation data as well as generation. So we currently have the standard scenario viewer, which builds on the Reeds model that we're using here to project under over 20 different kinds of scenarios, what might the future generation mix look like in each of those regions by technology, fossil and renewables. So that's also important, right? To understand if I have this 2035 goal, where might the generation mix be in 2035 in a business as usual case, or in a renewable cost case, or in a high battery storage cost case? So we're looking to integrate that generation mix data into this platform as a big part of our 2020 plan. Lots of other plans and underway, but those are the 2 big items. So
great, thank you, Megan. I do have one question. And the question is, does or will it the platform plan to do periodic updates from its connected data sets? For example, EIA sets does occasional updates or back corrections, and would those then get rolled into SLOPE?
We would not be able to update the whole data set based on a correction that EIA might issue, but we are looking to provide regular updates to the entire data sets which use EIA data as a source data set on a regular basis. So we're building in maintenance at the plan here so that we can keep this data updated. Moving forward, the grand vision is to try to we're also looking at, in 2020, adding user-saved settings, so you don't have to click on and off things and navigate around here each time to get where you'd like to go, but you can go back to your former saved settings. And that's in anticipation of eventually allowing users to replace some of our model data with measured data that they have. Obviously, states have a lot of data, and we might be much better than our model data. So that's the direction we're going, is to try to set up that ability for this platform.
Great, thank you. And thank you for that question. Don't see any other questions. So one question, Megan, I just wanted to ask. So I saw you shared that you can download the data through Excel. Is there also an ability to download some of these charts or integrate them into Word documents or such?
Yes, right now we don't have a PDF generator, but the easiest thing to do is to take a screenshot, right? We are looking to add a further labeling on these charts so that the screenshot will make more sense. But you can obviously just take a screenshot of any of these, and we ask you to make sure you're attributing it, right? So here's my download. Is the easiest way to load into a data set or a chart or a presentation, for example. So we're looking at future, build a PDF or report function, but we don't have that enabled quite yet. But you can, like I said, download all the data and make a custom chart with that data. These are Excel spreadsheets, as well as I can look at, okay, what's further detail on the methodology, and what is maybe a way for me to use my own data to plug in here and follow the same methodology. So here's the methodology for consumption. You can follow the same kind of process for pulling in data and projections and apply your own baseline data set for your city, state, or county, for example. So each one has links to the underlying data sources and methodologies.
Great, thank you. Let me see. There's another question. Does the database just use EIA data, or are there other sources? Sorry if you answered this already. They had to step away quickly, but they just wanted to know if there are other sources that this database integrates, or if it's just EIA data.
It actually doesn't pull straight from EIA data. So we integrate a lot of EIA data, both from the Form 861 and what is it, 876? It's I'm getting that number wrong. That's electricity, natural gas. So so we've got EIA data from electricity and natural gas consumption by state, but we also have the annual energy outlook that informs the methodology to generate this business as usual projection. But there's a lot of other data sets that go into it. So that's where I just was, right? So if we look at the methodology for this projection, you can see all of the different data sources that go into it in this table and how we approached it. So we've got American Community Survey, Census Business Patterns, Annual Survey of Manufacturers, depending on the sector that we're modeling, count of households, and census by census tract at the geography. There's the Cities Leap baseline data, which uses EIA data, but a lot of other approaches. It's basically a microsimulation, if you want to get all nerdy on this. The approach here, this methodology is also published separately, and there's a link in here as well. So no is the answer, that we don't just use EIA data. Lots of other data sets incorporated here, and there's generally links to those in the description and in this information link. If that answers your question.
Great, thank you, Megan. I don't see any other questions. So unless anybody has another question that they want to type up quickly or want to raise their hand, I would just give Megan and John a chance to add any closing comments, and then I will have one more housekeeping item and then close out the webinar. So Megan or John, if you want to have any final thoughts.
Kirsten, just want to plug one more time that the email address where we're taking comments is a great way for folks to give some feedback or ask further questions. And you know, as Megan and I have both said, we're in the beta phase of this, and so feedback and thoughts about how this might be more useful to any of you with planning and other activities that you're doing is very welcome.
Yes, thank you, John. And thank you so much to Megan, John, and Chris for participating in this webinar as speakers. I've also included the email that John mentioned in the follow-up email that you will all receive following this webinar. And if you have any questions, you can always email me, kverclas@naseo.org, with any questions that I can forward to John or Megan. I also want to mention that when you log out of the webinar, there should be a survey that pops up. There are a few questions that we and DOE and NREL had to see how you would use the Slope platform and if you have any suggestions for additional layers. So watch out when you close out of the webinar. There should be a survey popping up. And with that, thank you again to all the speakers, and thank you all to attending the webinar. And have a good day.
Thanks so much.